Hey guys, and welcome back to Philline, a podcast where we talk about what it's like being in our 20s in the 20s. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about nostalgia in our 20s, where it's happening quite often when we're always looking back, but it's important to remember to forgive, but never forget. So let's just get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Oh my goodness gracious, this week the weather has been absolutely beautiful and I literally don't want to do anything but be outside. And I'm just excited because, if it's this warm already in March, I can't imagine how summer's going to be. And it's like right around the corner. I'm super excited for that. And on top of that, Biden just signed the COVID relief bill, and I think we're all going to get our stimmies again, $1,400. So I'm super excited about that because that shit's going straight to my bills, and I definitely need it. So a little update on my fitness plan and my weight goals right now. I am literally 1.9 pounds away. I am so close. I can taste it. And once I'm there, I'm going to be so happy. And it's been a rough 2 or 3 months. And honestly, some days I'm really fed up with just this diet sometimes. But, it is just mental training and keeping strong and knowing that, you'll reach your goal eventually. So I'm excited to get there and kind of just get back to maintenance, because this cutting diet is definitely tough and it teaches you a lot to be strong, to eat healthier, to make better decisions with food. But obviously, just like any bulking diet, maintenance, or dieting, it shouldn't be something done forever. And, if you do it for so long, your metabolism starts to slow down. So it's good to kind of switch it up every now and then. Okay, so for this beautiful week, we're going to be talking about nostalgia in our 20s. And it's a lot of things. It's looking back at better times. It's looking back in the past quite often. I feel like when we enter our 20s, we are basically saying goodbye to a childhood. I mean, this is, we're not kids anymore. This is a new, different decade where we're joining the adult world. And as much as people might want to stay out of it, it's definitely hard to not be part of it. But I think that's why a lot of reasons, especially in our 20s, we look back quite often at the earlier years, especially college or high school, or even just smaller childhood memories. I mean, Blockbuster closing down for good was definitely the start of it. And now there's just a lot of random things going on that's like a whole chapter of my life closing. So obviously we all have a past. We've had a lot of different things happen to us, a lot of exposure, a lot of experiences and lessons that sometimes may have negatively affected us at the time and just shaped us to who we are today. So it's definitely normal to want to look back to the past, but it's more of accepting it and coming to terms with it and kind of not letting it prevent you from doing anything in the future or today. And I don't know if it's because, in our 20s we have more responsibilities, but I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I find myself missing the older days, like the past, and just feeling like the best of my days have already passed. And it sounds so dark, especially because I'm 24. I literally have a whole lifetime ahead of me, but I guess it won't be as careless as it used to be, when I was in college, just taking it day by day. And I think it's very hard to keep that mentality nowadays, especially because we're growing up and have different responsibilities and things. And I feel like nowadays there's always something to worry about. I can't just sit down and take a nap like I used to. And first of all, I used to nap every day for 3 or 4 hours at a time. But now I can barely even squeeze in a 30-minute nap, especially because, working full time and then puppy duties and all that stuff. And I think it's weird because I didn't really pay attention or care too much about the past, when I was before my 20s. I mean, I feel like now that I'm in my 20s, I'm remembering a lot more stuff. And I think it's weird. It's something I kind of Googled and researched a little bit to kind of understand more. And there's something in the psychology world, and they call it the reminiscence bump. And from what I read, that reminiscence bump, psychologists have been studying, and it seems like due to whatever reason, there's a higher import of childhood memories in our 20s. And they somewhat correlate it to the fact that the 20s is just a life-changing experience and you really figure yourself out. But they do say that in our 20s, our minds are the most active, the most fresh, the most agile than it will ever be for the remainder of our lives. And then there was another study that said, because we're in our 20s and we're focused on self-defining and figuring ourselves out, we are trying to remember, especially the memories that really enforces who we are and how we got to this point. And a lot of that is actually discovered when you're younger. And you don't realize that some childhood experiences basically shape you today, whether it be 10, 15, 20, 25 years later. And I think that's cool because, I feel like I remember the most random shit sometimes. Like, I really don't know. But it's cool to think that, you remember these things because there was something that happened in those memories that shaped you to who you are today and created you and your values and really made an impact on how you are as a person. And it doesn't always have to be a good memory. Sometimes it's a bad one. It's just whatever was crystal clear in your memories, because there's a moment in that memory where you realize that either it was what you wanted or wasn't what you wanted, and it opened your eyes to more dimensions of yourself. And I think that's so cool. Like, memory's always been an interesting topic for me because the brain is so complicated. Like, even in psychology classes, or I feel like every year there's something different about the brain that we learn and discover. So I think it's cool just understanding memory and how it works. And it's also weird to me because you don't remember absolutely everything that happens in your life, but at random moments, you can have crystal clear descriptions or just visuals about a specific memory. And I think that's so cool because there's a lot of triggers involved and just our development. It might trigger some memories. So I think that's so cool. And it's even for me, I don't even have the crazy memories yet. Like, I never had my first marriage yet. I didn't have my first mortgage. I didn't have my first child. So those memories also are defining to you as a person. But I think it's so cool that even the smallest things when you were a kid, you still kind of remember. And I don't know, I think it's so cool. I also think a lot of the memories that we do remember, it's during a time where we already had goals predefined and we didn't really have this open door to decide what we want in our lives. Like, I feel like I remember a lot of college, a lot of high school, and there were like zero responsibilities. And the only true goal that I had to achieve was graduating. So now it's like, you graduate and, you're like, okay, now what? What am I supposed to do now with my life? What goals am I supposed to have? And I feel like when we enter our 20s, this is a huge conversation that we need to, have with ourselves, because it really is like an open book. It's an open world. You can really accomplish anything you want, but it starts with you deciding what you want in the first place and kind of going from there. So I think defining your goals is probably the hardest part. I don't think the actual path to get anything done is as difficult as where you want to end up. So it's something major in our 20s that we definitely have to keep talking to ourselves about and figure out, because after this decade, our lives are going to be kind of centered towards those goals. And it's hard when you don't even know what you want for yourself either. But that's why I feel like our memories really come into play in our 20s, because when we're deciding what we want and we're deciding our future and our values, we tend to rely on what we've already learned or experienced, and therefore, bringing back some memories, emotions related to the memories, or just events that have been super important in your life, and that helps you make a decision for the future. And I think nostalgia kind of happens like a pro and con. There's good to it and there's bad to it. You guys can be sitting around the campfire or at a party and just totally looking back at, better days and just talking about memories that you've made together. But at the same time, it can be very toxic to you and your mental health if you constantly look back and see it as better days. And you kind of have to dig inside, why you're doing it so much, if you are, and really ask yourself why you're doing it. Like a really good example for me is that, I was always looking back at my weight. I was always looking back at pictures or just at a certain time period. I always thought I was fat and like telling myself I don't like my body and why am I like this? But then, now looking back and seeing pictures, like I was probably at my thinnest at that point or probably at my healthiest at that point. And, if you keep thinking about it and looking back, it's really hard to continue to be happy with what you have now. I'm going to challenge you guys. Try to think of the most challenging thing that's ever happened to you. You don't like to think about it. It's basically grayed out in your memories. You block it away. I mean, I do the same exact thing. But it low-key consumes you and it affects your ability to make better decisions for the future. And it's something that still kind of weighs on your shoulder. And that was me at the time when I was worried about my weight, and it sits with you and you just don't know how to get it off your shoulders, and it makes you look back at, the past, and it reminds you that those days were better than how they are now. And it sucks because sometimes when you're stuck in that and kind of looking at the past, you kind of regret some decisions that you made, and it kind of affects how you're emotionally feeling right now. And it's hard to not let it do that to you because, those days were great. I mean, they were careless, and now here you are, and you wish you could do it all over again and make a different decision. But that's why getting too hung up on the past isn't really good for your mental health, and it's really hard to stay stuck there. So it's better to, accept it, let it go, and use what you've learned to already, help you decide what you want for the future. And I think it's weird too because, you look back and let's say for my specific example, you look back and you're like, wow, I was the happiest, the healthiest weight wise. But your memory kind of distorts it in that way because, during that time, I really wasn't happy with myself. So it's like your brain is kind of messing with you in that sense that the memory that you think it was 100% happy and 100% the better days, you aren't actually remembering exactly what happened. It's kind of you're thinking that the better days already passed because there's something going on right now that's making you feel unhappy and just feeling like better days had already passed. And again, that's why I say the brain is crazy because you always remember the good memories, the happy moments, when you were a kid and you had ice cream and you're happy and you're in college and super careless and not really having any responsibilities, but you don't remember, just a few seconds before that event or moment and what happened before and what seconds of sadness were before it and how you were hurt before that situation. And you don't really try to remember how hard college was and how stressful it was and how much pressure it was and how hard it was to get jobs and just how your mental state was. You are trained in that way to not remember the bad that happened. So then you are only concentrating on the good stuff. So that's why when you look back, you think it was actually a great time, but there's a lot more going on there than what you think. And I feel like there's so much more to the science behind nostalgia and why we feel it. But a lot of these things are kind of something that just we look back on to remind us that there's something good. We tend to look back at our past and our lives constantly. And it's because there are emotions linked to those events. We put a little piece of our emotions in different memories and moments, and that's kind of what comes back to you when you're wanting to feel a certain way. So let's say you're really sad, you're stressed, and you're trying to figure out something to make you feel better, and therefore you go back to a specific memory that felt very stress-free and relaxing, and ironically your brain actually distorts it in a way that makes you forget about any stressful thing that happened before that event, during that event, and it helps you just focus on what wasn't so stressful about that event or memory. And it's kind of like an escape, especially during this time. I feel like I'm more nostalgic. I feel like I'm thinking more about the past because this current normalcy is not. It's definitely stressful. It's definitely causing anxiety, especially for just people who are exposed to COVID or potentially exposed. And I feel like that happens a lot these days, that people are just trying to escape reality by living through their past or reliving their past. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And I think a perfect example of that is just when you're stressed and looking to cope. Sometimes people go to their safe place, and sometimes that's a very good memory of something, of someone. But sometimes, you go back to a toxic relationship, a toxic person, and it starts to overwhelm you and depress you and give you more anxiety. So it really depends on how we're using nostalgia and how we're embracing it and how we're, doing our further future actions and how that's affecting just the quality of our life right now. A funny story about just memory and triggering things is that I was with my friend Gabby for brunch, and we were driving home, and she literally starts playing Paramore and We the Kings and Evanescence, those rock bands that I was super obsessed with in high school. And that just put me in such a good mood. Like, I immediately was singing, I was jamming, I was happy. But when I really think about it, those times were kind of rough. And even though it was rough, those songs got me out of it. So it's like, my brain did weed out what happened then, but still gave me those good memories to feel good and be happy about just current life right now. And I think it's funny because, sometimes people are like, oh, high school were the best years of your life, or college was the best years of your life. And I think it's so funny because everybody always looks back to college and high school. And maybe I'm still like just graduating and really understanding, life, but I loved college and high school, don't get me wrong. But right now it's kind of a comfortable, good feeling to finally, be comfortable being an adult. And I think it's different. And again, I think it's just growing up, our memories just become a little fuzzy. We don't really remember exactly what happened. And I think that's why when someone asks me if high school was the best years of my life or college, I'll be like, I don't know. I mean, right now it's pretty good, versus somebody who is 50 or 60 and they'll say that college really was the best years of their life because they've just experienced so much that it seems like looking back to those college days were the best days of their life. And they forget that so many great, amazing things happened after college. So I think that's interesting. And our brain definitely tricks us in that sense that the past is always better. And I think that's crazy too. Our brain really is something so complex and just amazing. I mean, I've seen really weird TikToks of like young kids talking about their past lives, and I don't know if that much is true. I don't know. I mean, everything about the spirit world kind of amazes me, confuses me, and it's hard to wrap my mind around it, but I'm sure the spirit world exists. And I don't know about past lives, but just watching those TikToks, I almost believe it. And it's pretty scary because, you remember a lot of the most recent memories more than like years ago. But I think it's crazy that, 2-year-olds can remember their past lives. And I think that's really creepy, but also interesting. I don't know if it's true. I don't think we'll ever know exactly what goes on before birth, after birth. I don't know, but it gives me chills to think about the fact that kids say they remember their past lives. And I think looking back in the past and nostalgia is just a bigger thing this time around, especially because of COVID. And I feel like a lot of people are starting to regress back to their teenage years, kind of just what they used to do when they were teenagers, playing The Sims, playing Animal Crossing, taking long naps in the weekend, and just feeling stressed out all the time. But again, it's what happens when your routine is messed up, when normal life is messed up. You are trying to find something that you feel comfortable, you feel safe, and not, negatively reacting to what's going on right now and not freaking out. So you resort to look back in the past and playing these games and going back to different habits when you were younger. That makes you feel safe and not freaking out to what's going on out there in the world because of any routine changes. And that's why it's important because, people look back into their past a lot when they're in stressful situations or just stressed out. So, when you're feeling like you're looking back a lot and it's really weighing you down, it's really good to kind of try to understand why you're feeling that way. why are you so hung up on the past? Are you unhappy right now? Are you avoiding something in your current life that you don't want to deal with? And 9 times out of 10, I can guarantee you that you're trying to avoid something that's in your life right now that you either don't want to deal with, or you're just too sad to deal with right now, and therefore you regress and go back in time. It's completely a normal thing for your brain to do. It's just a matter of being, active and realizing that it's happening and figuring out, what's going on with you, why are you feeling this way, and getting out of that looking back in the past all the time type thing. And definitely our generation, we were so used to doing things outside before COVID. And now the pandemic is basically taking away our ability to do that. So of course, what are we going to do? We're going to regress back to our memories in our childhood when we really couldn't do anything outside. Obviously besides playing outside, but I mean like going out, like going to bars and hanging out in places where, you're legally allowed to drink. And now, you're regressing back to childhood habits, maybe playing piano, playing guitar, playing video games, really old video games, or, discovering old music. It's just things like that you tend to do, especially when you're stressed or, just looking for some place or something to feel safe with. So I think that's cool in terms of looking back and regressing. It's totally fine to go back to old habits, when we were kids and doing things like video games or playing music, because that's something that we love to do, like our hobbies, and something that kept us grounded. So I think sometimes it's a good idea to look back in that aspect and realize that you can still incorporate it in your busy life, in your stressful life, and it's possible, to still stay connected to those things. Which, ties into the episode title, which is Forgiven but Not Forgotten. And, it applies both to past memories that were good and past memories that were bad. If you've had a bad experience with somebody and you've learned a lot from them, it shouldn't determine how your future reactions are. So, let's say somebody that you've met matches the exact criteria, personality description as somebody who you've had in your life that gave you a bad experience or a bad memory, and automatically you're creating this kind of stereotype, and you're not allowing yourself to realize that this person is going to be potentially different from your previous experience. I think that's one thing that ties into the forgiven but not forgotten aspect. You are now more cautious about it, but you should definitely give that one person, that new person, an opportunity to not be how other people have been in your past. And honestly, it's not the new people that you worry about most. It's the people that are still in your life and you've had a lot of history. Sometimes when you interact with somebody that you've known for so long, obviously you've had so many memories, and it's hard not to forget what has happened between the two of you or a group of you. And sometimes it gets back to your brain, all the different things that you guys experienced that sometimes broke you, sometimes hurt your feelings. And it's very easy to dwell on that so much to the point that you're not improving your relationship right now. And it could be something from like years ago. I mean, that happens sometimes. It happens more often than people admit, that, you're talking to your friend and you remember how bad it used to be, and it brings back bad feelings. And I think that's where it's kind of the hardest, because, in friendships or relationships or groups where trust is kind of shaky, that happens often, and it's really hard to kind of move forward. But every time I talk about this, I think about Jersey Shore, because I'm just like watching the show all over again. And I think it's so cool that they're still friends. They've been friends for so long, more than 10 years, and they've been through so much shit. Like, they literally fought with each other. They've had bad memories with each other, and they still are family. And that at least is motivating to me, not their history and all the shit that they did, because it was wild. But just seeing a friend group like that who's, they've had bad memories and they've endured so much, and they're still close and maybe closer than ever. I love that. And I think that's something that we should develop in our 20s, not just looking at somebody based on one bad experience. And there are two types of overthinkers: the one that looks way too far into the future, and the one that stays in the past. And the ones that stay in the past, definitely have a harder time looking at other people, with different opinions and different feelings than how people have treated them before in their past. And that can lead to a lot of things. You can get paranoid and want to always impress the people around you because you don't want what's happened to you happen again. Or, you put up a front, or you act different, or like different things, or, just agree with what the general opinion is in your friend group, to just have acceptance and have some type of feeling of safety like you used to have or that you didn't have before in your past. And then you get super self-conscious. You think that everyone is judging you. You think that everybody is, judging you, just looking at you and you're the center of everyone's attention, and it makes you feel uncomfortable, and you're constantly, thinking about conversations that you've had with people, if that was the right thing to say, and you feel like everything's a mistake, and that definitely overwhelms you and puts a whole weight on your shoulders that, you don't even need to be doing. But the only way to get out of it is to notice that it's happening and then, do something about it. And I always tie in active thinking in my podcast episodes. I feel like I can't escape that topic because active thinking is just so important in every aspect of life, especially if you're looking back too much into the future, because sometimes it really does weigh down on someone, and sometimes you're not even aware of what's going on around you in the moment because you're so busy dwelling on things in the past and worrying about things that might happen because of what's happened to you in the past. And, when you do that so much, you get caught up in overthinking, you forget about today, and you're not able to take the full advantage of your current day. And I think that's super hard to experience and go through in your 20s because we should be focusing on now and what we want for ourselves and not, all the things that we regretted in the past. One thing I truly regret that, I think often, but definitely not as much anymore. But when I first got my job, I wish that I didn't work as a server because I didn't need to all of college, but I just did, and unfortunately, I didn't get to study that much, and my studies were a little cut off because I was occupied with personal things and friendship issues, and I was too focused on other things rather than actually learning something. So, I didn't really take full advantage of school, and I feel like I'm definitely not the only person who regrets that or feels that way, but I can't let that affect me now. Sometimes when I start a new job or something, or when I learn something, and I know 100% I have learned this before in college, but I didn't pay attention to it. That frustrates me so much. But, it's not something that I dwell on that often because that's the past and that's literally where it should stay. It's already happened. It's already done with. You can't do anything about it. So regretting it is fine, but letting it overtake how you work now and how you present yourself and how you are in the office environment or how you're dealing with projects, that's where it's not a good idea to be thinking about the past. And again, I totally passed on a trip to Europe before COVID for my first job, with pressures from my manager and her telling me that I'm not going to get paid for these vacation days because I've already used my vacation days. That's, I regret it because, it's a huge trip and lots of memories. Like, why did I pick work over traveling to Europe? I'll never know. But I can't dwell on it now. You know what I mean? I can't constantly regret it, but I do think about it often. I think about a lot of things often, and I am a prime example of an overthinker. I'm one of those. And I constantly think about, why was I this way at a certain time? Why did I let a friendship die out? Why did I react this way? Why did I make fun of someone? Why did I do this and that? But it's over already. It's done. You can't change it. And I think that's a big thing that I still have to do too, is accept that it's already done with and over with and just continue, moving along with today and tomorrow. Like, I think one of the worst things that happens to me often is when people talk about a specific memory and I know damn well that I was not my best. Like, for example, I was cranky or something, and they always talk about it and they're like, oh my God, it was so fun. And I was like, not for me because I was in a bad bitchy mood. But anyways, that's besides the point. That's just something that, another example of how I overthink things. People don't even pay attention to the fact that I was crabby or I had a bad day that day. They focus on the good and what was fun out of it. So I need to get my head out of the sand and stop, weighing myself down and thinking that, everybody's always thinking about my bad moments. And again, I think people do that often, and I do that often because I know that in my childhood, I had a very wholesome and basic and just childish childhood that you can ever find. I mean, when kids are growing up, they're slowly watching Family Guy or South Park or just other shows that, are a little not so wholesome and not so child friendly. And I didn't really experience that. I was definitely a child. I didn't watch all these crazy MTV shows. I wasn't allowed to, first of all. That's a whole nother story. I had, a stricter childhood that I think compared to a lot of other people. And I wasn't exposed to a lot of different people because, one, I didn't allow myself. And two, my parents were super strict at the time, and they're definitely going to hate me if they hear that I've ever mentioned this, but I was afraid to even go see my friends, and I was always worried about impressing them and just, not showing too much skin, not, being a certain way, not watching specific shows because, one, I wasn't allowed to, and also I was a low-key hater and just not wanting to watch shows. But that's just one example too, and I think that a part of me regrets not trying harder, but what can I do? It's 10 years ago. I can't do anything about it, but why am I thinking about it so much? I don't know. I feel like sometimes I do regret that in the aspect that, people have been exposed to different things and are more familiar with, I guess, terms of today. I sound like an old person, but no, it's more of just being more exposed to social experiences and shit. And I think that didn't happen until college for me, where I was really, being more social. But I think that's just why I constantly am worried about what people think about me. I'm worried about how I look to people, and I'm just worried about embarrassing myself. So yeah, I didn't even realize I was feeling this way until I just talked about it right now. So it's kind of cool, but I definitely think about it often. And I think it's just my past and my experience and always trying to impress somebody that I still tend to do it sometimes, but I'm definitely more aware of when I'm feeling it and try not to feel that way because it's definitely heavy on my shoulders, and I feel like it's hard for me to be 100% happy when I continue dwelling on things like that. Literally, even going to the gym, I'm still low-key thinking about the past and low-key thinking about my weight because I can't even go there with a sports bra and leggings, for example. You know how some people wear sports bras and just no t-shirt? I'm always showing up in a t-shirt and leggings or a sweater because I'm self-conscious, but that again ties into me overthinking about my past and just how I viewed myself. And literally nobody told me I was fat except for, I had a little history in my family of just overweightness, so there was some comments about that, but in school, everybody was like, Philline, you're skinny. And I literally didn't see that ever. I always thought I was heavier and I wasn't happy with my body. So that still carries with me right now, especially when I go to the gym because there are mirrors everywhere. I don't like to look at myself, but I feel like I'm definitely taking that active step and trying my best to not care so much about other people judging me or, looking at me, and focusing more on the fact that I'm there to gym and improve my body and physical health. So nothing else matters. So I try to think about that, even though sometimes I do get super self-conscious. And that's just one of many examples of things that I feel, especially because of what I've experienced in the past. So it's good to, realize that you were maybe healthier at an earlier time, but right now you're also healthy and a different healthy, but you can definitely take advantage of that still right now and in the future. So we'll be right back. I'm going to drop a quick ad and then we can get back to overthinking and nostalgia. Honestly, I'm hungry, you guys. Do you ever just crave authentic Indian food? I know I do, especially being at home so much. If you live in the Plainsboro area in New Jersey, Jaya's Kitchen has the hookup. Jaya's Kitchen is completely made from scratch, specializing in Andhra cuisines. Like, no joke, I had the best shrimp masala and coconut rice I've ever had. It's just so delicious, and you can have it for any meal of the day. It's perfect for dinner or even a small family event. So if you want to have any inquiries on any orders, you can hit up Jaya's Kitchen on Instagram at JAYASKITCHN. Again, it's JAYASKITCHN. Go ahead, try it out and enjoy it. It won't disappoint, I promise. Okay guys, so welcome back, and we're kind of diving back into our conversation of overthinking, and now we're kind of aware of the fact that these things happen. What can we do to not focus so much on the past and not be so nostalgic in the sense that it's weighing us down? So we can definitely focus on the past when there's good things to talk about and good memories and funny things and embarrassing moments to laugh about. But when it comes down to that it's affecting your emotions, your health, your current situation, that's when you have to realize that it's a problem and you shouldn't be thinking so much into the past. And I feel like a lot of people's reasoning, behind why they overthink so much is that they can't control it. They can't stop it, but anything can be changed if you just put your mind and heart to it. And it's definitely hard to get past it, but it's doable. And the first thing is obviously noticing when you're doing it. And from there, you can realize, I'm overthinking, but why? Get in touch with yourself. Why are you feeling this way? Really get into your current situation and your feelings and why you feel like you're overthinking or looking back to the past and getting hung up on something. So the first thing in trying not to let that thought or memory or emotion consume you is basically accepting that you don't really need to think about it and accepting that it's already happened and it's in the past. So, if some specific memory comes up and you're like, damn, like I really miss those days, but, and there's a big but, but it's already said and done, already passed, and I can't do anything about it. So, I don't really need to be thinking about it so much. There's nothing I can change, absolutely nothing. So why am I so stressed out about it? It's basically letting go of things that you really have no control over anymore. It's already happened, so there's no point in stressing out about it. Then, it's good to plan out or figure out, what you're going to do if the thoughts come up again. If you're feeling too nostalgic, if you're letting a bad experience or a bad memory take over, what are you going to do? For me, when I get into overthinking like that and being super sad about better days, quote unquote, I actually try to do something to get my mind distracted. And that's something more like my hobbies, or, I watch a show, or I just do something that's mentally stimulating that can kind of steer me away from thinking those negative things. And, when I'm with people, I try to avoid those thoughts by, maybe playing a game or just talking about current life. I feel like when you are with somebody, it's easier to not overthink and not look back in the past so much because, you can really get into the topic of, oh, how's life going? How's this and this going? How's this going? And you start to talk about other things that kind of bring you back to today instead of the past. Another thing I do when I get hung up on my past or someone else's past is I try to express how I'm feeling. So if you're not comfortable talking to the person directly and, saying, hey, this is still kind of weighing on my shoulders and I don't know what to do about it, I'm still hurt. And, sometimes it comes up out of nowhere, but it's good to talk about, but sometimes it's hard to talk to the person about it. What is another alternative idea is to write things down and just kind of put it away. I mean, Sometimes I even write things on paper and just throw it out. And just the active, throwing out of something, it makes me feel like I'm finally letting it go. And it's kind of a personal decision and an active decision to let something go. You have to accept that things happen this way and you got to just let it go. It's easier said than done, don't get me wrong, but I feel like the more often you're noticing it and kind of doing something about it, the easier it is to do each and every time. And for me personally, I like to, unfortunately, dwell on other people's memories of when I wasn't there. I know that makes no sense, but if I describe it, I think you guys will understand. I get a little uncomfortable when people are talking about memories where I wasn't there. For example, my two friends went to a concert and I wasn't there, or, I genuinely just couldn't go to a certain event and people just brought it up and I get really sad because, that's your memory and your brain telling you and reminding you that you weren't there. So it's FOMO, but it's also something I shouldn't be thinking too much about. And like I said, I think in the previous episode, I don't know if it was the previous one or 2 episodes back, we have a lot more power over our mind, over our life, more than people think that we do. And our thoughts are something we definitely can at least try to control and at least, not be so stuck in negative thinking or in the past and focus on what's going on right now, because life easily can fly by. And if you're stuck in the past and dwelling too much on things that should have been, life can really just flash right by you. And there's this one saying about the past, and it says, the past is a nice place to visit, but not to live. And that I 100% agree with. You can let memories come back and of course relive the emotions, whether it's negative or positive, but it's definitely important not to forget that, especially right now in our 20s, this is still such a great decade for us and we're learning so much and so many new opportunities are coming, and previous experiences shouldn't stop us from, continuing to do better or do different than before. I think it's good to let our past kind of motivate us in that sense. Yes, we fucked up at a certain time, but now this time around, I'm not going to do the same thing. I'm going to handle it differently. And maybe this time I'll keep this friend. Maybe this time I'll get those grades. Maybe this time I'll be able to have an open meeting with people, have open conversations with people. So that's where we kind of embrace the past instead of dwelling so much and being so stuck and regretting things. And it's good to own those mistakes and own those previous memories and experiences and know that, that happened, yes, but now you're in charge of right now and the future, and we still have the power to create our own ending, write our own story. And I feel like people tend to forget that sometimes because they're so hung up on things that they wish that they did. And it's a tough pill to swallow and realize that a lot of previous things that have happened are partially your fault and partially on you. But if you forgive yourself and forgive everyone else that, caused these types of memories, it's very easy to continue moving forward and stop you from dwelling on the past so much. One thing that I thought was cool that I read is that, you can only connect the dots going backward. And I love that because, sometimes in life you regret things, but little do you know that these things had to happen to let other things happen. I think a good example was me not getting into NYU or me not getting into Columbia University in New York. And I ended up going to Rutgers in New Jersey, and I regretted so much, like not doing better, not writing better essays, and not being just a better applicant for these colleges. But if I went to school in New York, do you know how much my life would be different? I definitely know it would be different. I wouldn't have the same friends right now. I wouldn't be as close to everyone that I am now. And I wouldn't be having this life that I'm super happy and thankful for. So it's just the little things like that. It's just one example. You don't realize why things are happening until, in the future when something happens and you're like, oh, that's why these things happen. So I think that's also another thing, you don't want to dwell too much in the past, because I like to think that something good comes out of everything, and that's just me as a person. But I think thinking that way is really good in your 20s because it's definitely a trial and you're going to learn things and do things that maybe aren't the best ideas, but you won't know until it happens. And, it could be happening for a reason. And that reason is maybe just not in your current situation right now. Maybe it's coming in the future. So I do think that low-key everything is kind of intertwined, interconnected. I'm a very big believer of fate and space and things like that, but it's at least more comforting, even if it's not true. It's more comforting to be more positive about a situation and know that, these things are happening for a reason, and it'll help you get through the tough times instead of being so hung up on the past. And again, that's where it starts, It's when you get up and just make the decision to stop caring so much about what has happened before, whether it's good or bad, and just continue to be your best self. I mean, at that time where those events happened, those memories happened, you were your best self. And here you were after all these experiences and being a better best self. And you won't know that until later on in life when you're even better. So I think life is just a whole large life experience, and learning so many things on your own. It takes time, and everything that happens, I feel like happens for a reason. So I would hang tight to that at least. And it'll help me, get through today and focus more on the future and embracing, my past, in the sense that everything that has happened to me is what made me who I am today. And I think that definitely stays with me, and it's helped me. I think the more that I've, been active in realizing that I do that and being more embraceful about my thoughts, I feel like life is just a little bit more happier and a little bit more relaxing. I definitely had a lot of pressures in my childhood, and I was cranky and I was lashing out on people, and I'm definitely totally a different person now. So I'm grateful for everything that has happened to me, whether it's good or bad. So yeah, the past is always going to be a part of you, but it doesn't define you today. And everybody's just constantly evolving, learning, and nourishing themselves and really figuring themselves out, especially in our 20s. So I think that's something definitely to consider when we're looking at ourselves and looking at other people. And I think when we do that, it'll be a lot easier to communicate with everybody and just be a happier generation. So yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you had a good time really talking about nostalgia, looking back in our past, and I hope that you've learned a thing or two that you can definitely apply to your life now, because the past already happened, and now it's about now and the future, and learning from our past and continuing to make ourselves better. If you have any questions or concerns or DMs or topics you'd like me to talk about, feel free to hit me up on Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter. My Instagram and TikTok are at Philline Podcast, and my Twitter is at Philline. So yeah, feel free to let me know if you guys have any book recommendations on this, because I love reading about self-love and self-care and just always being a better self and living life to, our full potentials. So yeah, that's it for now. Till next time. Bye.